Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Damage Report. I'm John Idarilla, joined, as always, on Fridays by Brett Erlich of Happy Half Hour and other awesome shows. Brett Erlich, how's it going?
I'm so excited to be here in the neighborhood because there's so much going on, and we're going to cover the news today. But then later on, when the evening comes, we're going to play a little Game Busters. So it's going to be Jackbox games. You're going to join a lot of folks. It's going to be awesome.
That is going to be awesome, and everyone can check that out later on today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We've got, I'll say, a delightful show for you. Not only are we going to give you updates on what's going on in Ukraine, none of that is particularly delightful, but we're going to talk about a fairly innovative idea that the Democrats have that in theory would do quite a bit to allay people's financial fears over high gas prices. We've got more horrible laws trying to strip away women's reproductive rights. We've got assorted bad people, lots of bad stuff, honestly, but we will also have animals, very amazing looking animals, glorious, transcendent animals. And then we will be closing out the week and the show, as we always do, by throwing away our garbage people of the week. I've chosen one, Brett's chosen one, and tens of thousands of you have voted on yours as well. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. Along the way, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button and sharing the stream so that people know we're live. And if you want to send us any comments, tweets, super chats, and all that, we can respond as we go. But with all that said, Brett, are you ready to talk about some news?
I couldn't be more ready. As the title reads in that one video they find in Joaquin Phoenix's room in the movie Parenthood, I'm wet, wild, and ready.
I don't have any basis for that reference, but I am scared. Anyway, okay, with that, let's talk about some stuff, starting with this.
Your White House has said that Russia may use chemical weapons or create a false flag operation to use them. What evidence have you seen showing that? And would the US have a military response if Putin does launch a chemical weapons attack?
I'm not going to speak about the intelligence, but Russia would pay a severe price if they use chemicals.
So that is Joe Biden responding to a question from a reporter about the dominant conversation around Ukraine this week, which is, are chemical weapons going to be used? If so, who? What's going on? Scary secret labs and all that stuff. With the reporter implying there that it's rational to assume that if chemical weapons were to be used by one party, the US would militarily have a reaction, which could be disastrous. In any event, the Kremlin, as of right now, has denied that it's suggesting to prepare a chemical weapons attack. Bear in mind, they also denied that they were preparing to invade Ukraine for a couple of months. So not exactly the most credible government in the world right now, but they went on to blame the Ukraine and the US for a possible future attack. So everyone is blaming everyone. Everything is terrible. We're gonna turn to some updates on what's actually happening. And the overarching theme is really bad for civilians in Ukraine, also shockingly bad for the Russian invading forces. So we've got a historic comparison to make about how bad it is that is absolutely devastating. But before we get into that, Brett, all the stuff about the chemical weapons attacks, is this gonna be like some of the nuclear threats that were very scary for a bit, but then we go back to just the regular horror, of conventional weapons use?
Just as there is a long tail of fallout following a nuclear attack, there is a long tail of fallout following the discussion of chemical weapons. I can't wait for there to be some discussion of maybe it happened, and then 6 months later, they're still saying that it's a false flag operation. In terms of the accusations that Russia might deny any potential attack, this is the part where everybody just kind of accidentally tips their hand. People that say that, that if Russia is the bad guy, they're going to be the ones who friggin' do the chemical attack. And then there's others that say that America's actually the one behind it and it was a false flag operation. I just want to remind you that recently the Russian ambassador denied that they're attacking Ukraine.
At all.
We didn't attack Ukraine at all. Yeah. In a video, he's like, we didn't attack them. That's it.
Did the troops got lost, I suppose.
But it's just like, that's the Russian thing. That's what everybody loses sight of. That's how they do. And you can say, well, that's how America does. And my response is, in all of these discussions, we must return to the fundamental principle that there was an assurance that Ukraine would not join NATO. And then after that, the Russians invaded.
Yeah.
Remember that as Ted Cruz tries to change the subject, as everybody and their mother tries to change the subject away from the fact that everybody on the right side of the aisle and on Fox News was wrong about that.
Yeah.
You have to remain with your eye on the ball, focused on the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine. And that's why Biden is doing all of the things he's doing, announcing that we're no longer trading with Russia with most favored nation status, raising tariffs, crippling the dollar to the point where someone reportedly was just going to a mall and throwing rubles all over the place because the paper money means nothing anymore. That's it.
Yeah, look, there is an ongoing effort on a lot of topics, but we're seeing it here in multiple different areas to change how you think and how you feel about something that is indisputably horrifying. Whether it's the accusations about like, well, should they have been somehow even clearer about joining NATO or whatever, or the labs now. What you need to understand is whether something is 0% true, 5% true, 80% true, the point is not the thing that's being talked about. It is an attempt to hijack your feelings, because for some groups, the reaction to the war has shocked them and they don't like it because people don't like it. People are opposed to this. They're horrified by what they're seeing. They don't want the war. That is not an okay position for so many Americans and people around the world to have from the point of view of some incredibly dishonest actors. And so they have got to move you from that position. You are centering compassion, empathy, concern, opposition to imperialism, and it's gotta stop. And so they will try to come up with something. But I'm gonna jump way ahead of any of this. I don't know if it's a month or a year before we know everything that there is to know factually about these labs or whatever. Whatever they find in the labs, which seems most likely it's going to be leftover things from the Soviet era that are being destroyed, or let's say they find weapons. They're not gonna find anything that justifies what's happened, okay? And no one who tries to deceive you is going to explicitly say that it justifies the invasion. They're never gonna make that claim because that's bonkers. But there will be the implication, not just in terms of the way they talk about things, but the amount that they talk about some things. The conversation is now gonna shift from don't pay attention to the hospitals being bombed, don't pay attention to the attacks on civilians using humanitarian corridors. Don't think about that stuff. There's no room to, there's no time to, because we're talking about these labs and what's Fauci up to and Hunter Biden and all that. Okay, we will try to track and pay attention to every fact as it develops, but we're not going to allow it to deflect from the horror of the moment. Anyway, any other thoughts, Bert, before we move on?
No, that's absolutely it. There's just remember the theme is frequently normally what happens is the Republicans are really good at simplifying things, but they can't now because they already tried to simplify it down to Putin's not a bad guy.
Yeah,
that's proven wrong. When he invades Ukraine, you can't do that. And when people come back and say, well, America invades other countries, I agree that we shouldn't do that either.
Exactly.
So that is a point you made, not the point. Everyone's trying to make a point, but the point is that Russia invaded Ukraine when they should not have. And if you're trying to find some tiny little rhetorical footing that holds amid this avalanche of the point, we can't let them do that.
Yeah.
We can't fail everyone in the world by saying, well, actually, you know what? It's all a wash now because in one factory, the US and Ukraine were sketchy.
Yeah, and but one final note on this, for anyone who's relatively new to American politics, if you weren't like actively following media during the run up to like the war in Iraq and stuff like that, there is a special irony to people effectively co-opting the two, like the sorts of rationales that were used to defend that. Hey, maybe there are weapons of mass destruction in there, gotta go in there. Ooh, there's radical people, gotta invade. That's what they're saying about Ukraine. There's Nazis, there's chemical weapons, that justifies it. Literally every single person now pushing that implied that the neocons were 100% wrong to use that as a justification to attack Iraq. But suddenly now, perfectly good reasons for an imperial power to invade another country. Isn't that ironic? The invasion of Ukraine has not been going as Russia might have planned, but I want to put it in perspective because I hadn't really thought about this before. It was raised, there's some discussion, I think on MSNBC, some reporter might have mentioned this. Whether you accept Ukraine's numbers on the number of Russian soldiers that have died, or the US estimation, the UN estimation, what it looks like at this point, if you sort of split the difference there, because we can't trust any one source for that information wholly, it seems as if Russia might have, in 2 weeks, lost about a third as many soldiers as they lost in Afghanistan in a decade of war. Urban combat, all that. Remember, if you're not familiar, it was considered a massive quagmire, a massive loss of life and money, a huge debacle for Russia over the course of effectively the 80s, roughly. It's been 2 weeks, and they're about a third into that. And if this thing doesn't go, like from their point of view, exactly as they would want in the near future, they will rapidly pass those numbers from Afghanistan. I don't know, does it take a month? Does it take 3 months, 6 months? But it isn't, this is way worse already at this point from Afghanistan. And we'll see if that ends up leading to an opening for diplomacy possibly, but you have got to imagine that in addition to the deaths of multiple generals, the fact that the convoy, by the way, has apparently dispersed. Now, we're gonna show you the satellite photo. Some of the segments of the convoy have gone off to do what they want to do, but there's a ton of left behind, destroyed and abandoned vehicles there. The Russian stock market has been shut down for 11 days. This is a lot of really devastating news that none of this is how it was supposed to go from the point of view of Putin and his inner circle, Brett.
Yeah, we're past the point. So here's what happens in all these discussions is there's a lot of people, there's a lot of folks that are like, all right, well, this would be a failure. And levying some kind of sanctions against the Russian government would be, sanctions are a form of warfare. Yes, and it's less bloody than other kinds of warfare. And I don't know what else you're supposed to do in the meantime, but all the people who are like, who make a living out of, or at least respect themselves enough to criticize Biden, I'll say like, he's doing all right. Like he is not engaging in the stupid petty conversations that they're trying to pull him off toward. He has very silently and effectively navigated, for the most part, everything about this war that sadly you learn by being in Washington for 1 billion years, right? Mm-hmm. He's now able to pick up the phone and call. And this is really the only area of effectiveness that kind of experience is worth. And the side of the coin he's on is the opposite of Lindsey Graham's side of the coin, to be frank. Like Lindsey Graham and that kind of hawkish, experienced DC insider would have like declared war potentially by now, or at least rattled the saber in a very unsafe way, not to mention ironic from the fact that when you hear Lindsey Graham talk, the last thing you get is scared. Mm-hmm. But to get back to Putin's calculations, I don't think that Ukraine is remotely out of the woods, because one thing, as much as you learned from Afghanistan that they got in a quagmire and they eventually pulled out, the other thing about Russian military resolve is they really don't care that much how many of them die.
Yeah, that's devastating. No, and I'm so glad that you're acknowledging that, because like the fact that so many, and by the way, this is in no means to not like to avoid the fact that lots of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians are dying. That's devastating too. Seeing the number of Russian soldiers dying, seeing like every helicopter you see get shot down, every like scorched, discarded tank. Those are soldiers that we have no reason to believe have any interest in this war any more than we would be if we were sent to invade some country. I'm against the people who have led to this invasion, and I'm sure there are some Russians that are totally gung-ho to do it. But lots of them are just kids. They're 17, 18, 19-year-old. They're doing what they were ordered to do. God only knows what would happen to them if they tried not to. And so this is devastating to see so many dead on both sides that should not have happened. Didn't
and
need
everybody's
to happen.
trying to pull these through lines, these ridiculous tenuous threads. The through line you can pull is in the wake of 9/11, a lot of young Americans signed up for the war and went in a misguided effort in Iraq and Afghanistan and lost their lives, or at least their lives were by certain definitions ruined. And that is a through line you can pull to these Russian folks who have been told that there's like they've been lied to essentially about how why they would get involved in it, and now they're encountering that, and their lives are either lost or ruined in the meantime. Because what are their options? One, to potentially survive and execute this exercise or this attack. The others are, you get captured, you get killed, you desert your country by definition, but you do it for something that when you get there, you realize is a noble cause. It's just not, you can't go back until there's a completely different regime and attitude back in Mother Russia, or they invent a usable lie. But in the meantime, the amount of lying coming out of the Kremlin is, if you want to be that kind of cynical American, you could say it's on Pentagon levels, if not exceeding them.
Now, I also want to let you know that while things are not going at all well for the Russians, also devastating for the Ukrainians and likely to become more so. Very briefly, some of the vehicles that have branched off from the convoy are now moving into position to be used. There's reports of howitzers and rocket launchers near a couple of different cities. And so those will lead to Ukrainian losses, likely a significant percentage civilian as well. In Mariupol in particular, one of the areas that has been worst besieged in the last week or so, apparently, well, according to a source inside the Ukrainian government, so again, grain of salt, more than 1,300 people have died in just 10 days. Nearly 500,000 people. There's no heat, there's no phone service. For most, there's no electricity. It gets below freezing. Bodies are being buried in mass graves. Absolutely devastating. Again, reminder, when people try to get you to stop thinking about this in terms of the human cost and start getting, well, like there's all these really interesting, sexy conspiracy theories. Let's think about that instead. Remember, those people are suffering, dying, being tossed into mass graves because there's no alternative. That is what they're trying to distract you from. So just bear that in mind.
And all those people will also like harp on privilege. Like there's a term of white privilege. You have like American privilege just to be able to dabble. And these folks specifically have the privilege to be able to dabble in these ridiculous conspiracy theories, and the people there don't.
Yeah. Bear in mind, as the lower third's been alluding to, the WHO says there's been at least 26 attacks on Ukrainian health facilities since the start of the invasion. And bear in mind, lots of conspiracy theories around those as well. Oh no, don't worry about the hospitals being bombed. They weren't hospitals. They were just being taken over by radicals. It's the sort of arguments we see in other conflicts. It's not true there, it's not true here. There's crisis actors. No, it's not true. This whole thing went viral about this woman who was like, "Whoa, did you know that this pregnant woman was an actress?" Yeah, she was an actress. She was also pregnant. That's why she was there. She just gave birth, by the way. Anyway, there's just so much misinformation. Everyone be very careful about who you go to for information like this. In any event, in addition to his earlier comments, Joe Biden today said that the US would welcome Ukrainian refugees, quote, with open arms, which I very much hope turns out to be true, especially since over 2.5 million Ukrainian refugees have already fled in just 2 weeks. That number likely to rise. I'm not 100% sure though. First of all, we are not a country that generally has been all that open to refugees, particularly in the last decade or so. Maybe there will be something different about this conflict. It has captured people's attention. Maybe the Republicans won't like absolutely lose their minds if we suggest bringing in more than 2,000 or 3,000. We'll see. I would also say, as we've been saying from the very beginning, if we are super open and welcoming to Ukrainian refugees, which we very much should be, we should keep that in mind. Because this is not the only refugee crisis currently ongoing, let alone what will occur in the next few years. Brett?
I mean, for me, it comes back to, there's a lot of people, and there's some folks in the chat talking about like pleas from other countries for Ukraine to accept Putin's proposal for a ceasefire. But Putin's proposal for a ceasefire is absolutely ridiculous. Like he invaded the country and he wants Ukraine to demilitarize. Like you can't do that. Like, give up parts of the country, fine. I don't know. They've been besieged and there's talk about that. Declare a ceasefire. That is what people want. But Putin's like, all right, cool. So next thing you do for peace sake is get rid of all weapons. Trust me. Like we can't do that. And that's the only thing that I think, if as we're doing, there's going to be more talks on Monday, a third round. So we'll see how that goes. But that's where we're at.
Yeah. Anyway, but really fast, just because I found this to be fascinating. Meta, which I hate calling it that, it's Facebook. Don't let them hide all of the terrible things that they've done, the horrible policies, the benefiting financially off the spreading of hate and misinformation by hiding behind a different name. What are they, a private military? They just shift their name? It's Facebook. Anyway, they're temporarily going to allow users in some countries to post hateful comments against Russian attackers in Ukraine, against Putin himself, as well as the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. They'll allow posts containing death threats against Putin and Lukashenko unless they reference other individuals or are deemed to be credible threats of actual violence with specifics like place and time. That is amazing. They specifically, okay, here are a couple of leaders you could advocate for the murder of. Does that not seem a little bit weird, Pratt?
It is just at every turn, they make a stupid decision. It's okay for you to keep banning death threats. That's it. Like that's okay. You can do it. But it's just this detached, like I know these folks. It's this detached, weird, neoliberal, elitist, and I always call it District 1. It's very Hunger Games District 1. It's folks being like, I'm just a worldly human being who understands plights and I'm so sensitive and great. Anyways, can you please turn down your music and your complaining because I need to go to hot yoga in 5 minutes. That's how it is. Just a really thoughtful, touching, inspirational Instagram message over a photo that looks like it's done by Ansel Adams, but really it's from their front porch because they live in Shangri-La and they have no real connection to these human beings, though they think they do. And that's actually the most dangerous part of it.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like I get the anger, I get that. Is this supposed to be setting a precedent for what future conflicts, like who will be added to the kill list next that you can advocate for the? I don't know.
The decisions made after a meeting where they each take some kind of ball that they pass around, the idea ball that the other idea ball person gets to give. They don't call them bad ideas and change. They don't call them negatives from the old idea. They call them deltas. Things we'd like to change because we don't want any negativity here.
Okay, everybody, let's break down a couple of different approaches to a crisis currently affecting America. Here is the first.
I think it's up to the oil companies who've been scared to death to come public because they don't want things to have more retribution their way. It's incumbent on them to stand up and let everybody know. You know your industry inside and out. I don't have a problem with you earning a profit. Number one, if you're not gouging, let everyone know you're not gouging. Number two is tell us in very fundamental terms, because we're not in the business, what you're doing with those permits and those leases, and tell them the reality of potentially what you could be doing if the government would unleash it. Everybody would cover it, the networks would carry it, and this would be the pushback on everything that the spokesperson for President Biden is saying.
Would they cover it? Because I think we would cover it and mention the other side of the story, but most of the rest of the media, watch them find a way to make it Putin's price hike. They'll just say that's the flax for the oil and gas industry, pushing their industry line. But everything you're saying is correct. The difference.
Yeah, except that it's not. He is literally asking for oil company Flax to come forward and say that they didn't do anything wrong. That was exactly what he was asking for, Pete Hegseth. But take a look. Look, there's some specific parts of what Brian Kilmeade says that I have a problem with, but it's more so the vibe. he is speaking directly to oil companies, which I don't generally see. We don't do that here. If I were to, I would say, I don't know, Exxon, go F yourself. I don't know. But he's giving advice to them. He's continually reassuring them that he has their back. I don't mind when you make a profit, whether you're price gouging or not. Who's to say? Actually, you're to say. You should come forward and say it. Like, they have been trying to pretend that the most important issue in America right now is rising gas prices. And yet when it comes to doing something about it, they are 100% on the side of the people that are getting away with making billions of dollars during record high prices, Brett.
This is hilarious. This is the theme you need to take away from this is Fox News, specifically Fox and Friends, never talks to their audience or anyone like a human being talks to another human being. In the morning on Fox News, and especially on Tucker Carlson, it's always them talking to their audience like they're children. And when they talk to oil execs, it's like they're talking to the person who also gives them their allowance. It's like, if it's not too much trouble, golly gee, like I gotta walk this line between like not alienating this faux populism we have at the network, but also like I know that when we go to break, it's gonna be like some kind of weird hemorrhoid medication commercial followed by like 3 oil company commercials. So if you could be so kind as to advertise here, that would be great. If you could, sir, please, sir.
Yeah. Like, tell us whether you're price gouging. What are you talking about? I don't need, nor do I care about their opinion on it. The price has gone massively up. They're making more money than ever. What would price gouging be if not that? The price is up, they're benefiting. It's not just covering additional costs, they're profiting more. This is not a complicated equation.
And this is exactly the case for progressivism. Progressivism, for me, pragmatic progressivism, is looking at times when there's some kind of a failure or alienation of a disenfranchised group, and you have to have some kind of mechanism to eliminate the corruption that creates that problem. And in this situation, the corruption that creates that problem is the oil companies seeing what they can get away with. And the disenfranchised group is everyone who needs to buy gas. And in the meantime, my proof that they are price gouging and they don't actually care about finding a price people would, a reasonable price that people will still pay, is the record profits they're making. And if it's not revenue, obviously revenue would go up, but they're making record profits, which means this is just fake price points that we have to pay.
Exactly, that's all it is. And they do not actually have a problem with that. Like, if I can get through to you on one thing, it is that this is performative. They're perfectly fine with the price being high because they support that industry making ever increasing amounts of profits. And we're gonna talk about those profits now. We gotta get into, we're running low on time.
Okay, last thing is, in New York, if you're on a news broadcast, someone comes and picks you up at your house. You never have to drive yourself. Those folks never once, and I know this for a fact, never once have to drive to the office. So those Fox and Friends, they have a chauffeur who drives them places. They are so wildly detached.
Yes, meanwhile, I've tried to get Brett to drive me to work, but so far he won't. Anyway, so what do we do? Well, the Democrats actually do have an idea. If the problem is that gas prices are high, here's one idea of how you can fix it. And by the way, the gas prices are high. We can all agree about that. Up to $4.31 per gallon on Thursday, according to AAA. Different groups have different estimates, but it's high regardless. You know what else is high? The amount of profits coming to these companies. So pre-tax profits this year for ConocoPhillips, Chevron, ExxonMobil, Hess, and Devon Energy are expected to increase by 43, 39, 28, 56, and 47% respectively. Those are very significant climbs, thus the claims of price gouging. Anyway, the Democrats have a plan. You're all making a ton of money exploiting this situation that's going on right now. How about we use a little bit of that money to actually help people? So they came out with a bill just yesterday to tax the largest oil companies and use the money to provide quarterly checks to Americans. It's almost like the Alaskan model. So the legislation would only apply to large firms like ExxonMobil that produce or import over 300,000 oil barrels per day. So really small companies are not going to be affected by this. It's a 50% tax that would be imposed on the difference between the current price of a barrel and the average price between 2015 to 2019. Representative Ro Khanna and Sheldon Whitehouse are the main sponsors for this, but people like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and others are behind it as well. So what would happen is tax filers making under $75,000 for an individual and double that for couples would get at $120 per barrel, about $240 a year. Joint filers would get about $360, and that would help to subsidize a bit of the extra cost of paying for your own fuel. It's an interesting idea. So far, a lot of Republicans don't seem particularly interested. Also, Joe Manchin didn't respond to a request for comment from Insider. I wonder what position he's going to take on it. Brett, what do you think?
He said that he'd be fine paying 10 cents extra for gas if it meant doing the right thing abroad.
What about here? What about doing the right thing here?
Yeah, he says that he would be fine with us paying 10 cents extra for gas. So technically, he's on the side of doing whatever we need to do abroad and punishing people back home. And he completely in doing that, he tries to oversimplify and mischaracterize the problem, which is price gouging and record profits. Maybe it won't come down to that exact amount of difference being like 10 cents extra that they're price gouging us, but still it's wildly insane that they aren't even trying. When you hear record profits, when you're having record troubles, that's the problem.
Exactly. By the way, a lot of these oil companies, like between 2015 and 2022, got 1.95 together collectively in domestic taxes back. Like they had negative taxes for years and years and years. So when people tell you that this proposal is radical, what do you think the status quo is? Women who suffer from a dangerous, potentially life-threatening complication of pregnancy called an ectopic pregnancy could be banned from getting abortions if a new law being proposed in Missouri goes through. That's bad enough. But people who assist them could get years and years in prison for trying to save these women's lives. And we want to give you the details. This is Republican State Representative Brian Seitz, HB 2810, now being proposed. It would make it a felony offense to transport or make available, quote, abortion-inducing devices or drugs in the state. Anyone found guilty of doing so would be guilty of a Class B felony. They could spend 5 to 15 years in prison. And in fact, the penalties in this case, because of the particular wording of the bill, are actually worse in cases where a woman is suffering an ectopic pregnancy. You can see a bit of the bill here. If you want to learn more about it individually, all the text is available. This is not speculation, it's out there and they're perfectly happy with this. Now, if you're not familiar with an ectopic pregnancy and why criminalizing abortions in that situation is even worse than normal, it's that it's a complication that occurs when a fertilized egg implants and grows in a woman's body outside of her uterus, usually in the fallopian tube. The fertilized egg cannot survive. Like that, this is indisputable. There is no full-term live birth that comes about as a result of this. The only question is how much suffering and possible death the woman gonna go through. And they're not concerned about that part of it. Sam Gowley is an ER doctor, says, just to be crystal clear, ectopic pregnancies are ones that have been implanted in the wrong anatomical location. They are not viable pregnancies. They rupture, bleed, and kill women. This is one of the most ignorant, insane things I have ever heard. And I want to remind you, by the way, we had Sabrina on months ago to talk about her experience with this. You might remember her video, and you can go watch it about her ectopic pregnancy. She suffered horribly, could have lost her life over that. They would lock up for years anyone who was involved in that. They would have stopped her from having it, by the way. They might have killed her, but they would also lock up anyone who helped her to exercise her reproductive rights. That is how radical they're getting on this topic. It's not just about banning abortions, it's about clamping down on the most insane radical versions of all of this to satisfy an absolutely rabid base who just wants to see these sorts of things. What do you think?
This is absolutely radical. This proves if you were uncertain that the Republican Party was detached from reality in a way that actually makes them the American Taliban, and as Noam Chomsky said, also a cult, basically an ideological group of radicals, this is it. Because the reality that decent, normal human beings would conclude would reason with, understand, and conclude is that it's not a viable pregnancy. This would kill and torture I'll call her a mother, but literally she could never become a mother as a result of this type of pregnancy. They are so engorged. They are so unmoored from reality, and so in a blissful like trance about this religious fundamentalism that they'll lock you up for saving your own life.
Exactly.
The same group that says Kyle Rittenhouse saved his life by killing a human being. These guys are like, they're going to lock women up for 5 to 15 years for trying to save their own life.
Doctors.
And they could, and the doctors, and the doctors, not the women, but that, and in doing so, they talk about mob mentality from us. They're handing pitchforks to all their followers to go storm people's houses and call out whoever is trying to save women's lives. Period.
That's absolutely madness. What like the term pro-life has never been worth much. What the hell is that supposed to mean in this situation? There's no pregnancy that comes out of this. The question is, will you have a dead woman? And they say yes. They say, by the way, they say it explicitly, even when you drill in and try to get them to think about what they're saying. He said, the guy putting this forward said, the penalties laid out are not strict enough. When asked if he backed the death penalty for those providing abortion drugs, he said, we'll have to look at that in other legislation. So I know that like staying invested difficult in politics. And it seems like, well, Biden's in charge, Democrats are in charge. Are we really in that crucial of a time? I'll ask you, what do you think? What do you think about what is going on in states around the country? The moves that they're making. By the way, the Texas Supreme Court just ruled today that the dog the bounty hunter 6-week ban, where they Karenize everyone and sue the pants off of people for exercising their rights. No, it stands. The providers lose. It'll get appealed, but for right now, every Supreme Court that has weighed in on this is like, no, they are totally right to do this. And that is being used as the groundwork for a number of other bills that are even more insane. Pro-life. They want to literally kill doctors for saving a woman's life. And one last point, I apologize. We keep stressing that in an ectopic pregnancy, it cannot result in birth. That is just not how it works. But I want to be very clear. It wouldn't matter if it could. Those are your rights. You've had them for more than a half century. You get to do that if you choose to. It's more abhorrent in some way, but it is also a dodge. Okay, whether it could or not, that's your right. It was given to you long before most of you were even born by the Supreme Court. Don't let these insane religious zealots take it away from you. Batmanda says, I almost died from ectopic pregnancy. Once you have one, you're likely to have another. Ohio tried to require the unviable zygote to be reimplanted into the uterus. This is not a thing that you can do. They don't know anything, but if they knew, they wouldn't care. That is why pointing out that Plan B it's not an abortion. It doesn't matter how many times we fact check that. They don't care. They're not opposed to it based on a misconception about the facts. They're opposed to it because it's valuable to them politically to be so.
It's the same as saying, let's see if we can inject disinfectant into the body. There's just something they, without knowing about science, thought it sounded like it made sense. And this is what we're dealing with. So if everybody seems like really tired and frustrated, it's because of that.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of battles to fight simultaneously. I want to warn you, the footage that we are about to show you is incredibly graphic. If you believe that it might be triggering, feel free to skip ahead or turn away. With that said, here is the video.
I'm a mother of a murdered child.
Just film.
I'm a mother of a murdered child. Why are you touching me?
Because I'm asking
stepping
you
back.
to move.
I am moved. I have moved.
Please.
You're violating my rights because you're on my property.
I don't know. Like, you okay, buddy? Hit my door, shut it left. Back up. Back up.
I haven't done anything. I haven't done anything. Mariah, call. I am.
I am.
No, you said your
So we're gonna have more video for you, but what you're seeing right there is an incident of the family of Maria Hereford and a number of cops. This is in Hemet, California. The cops came in and not only harassed them, began to get incredibly physical with them, with their property, also with their dogs. And so an absolutely horrendous night being documented thanks to the fact that people have cameras these days. We might otherwise never have found out about this, and we will, as I said, have more footage. But a federal civil rights lawsuit has been filed on behalf of Mariah, her mother, Monet, and her fiance as well, saying that the police that you could see moving around there illegally searched Gaddison's car and then violently arrested Hereford and her mother for filming the encounter. According to the lawsuit, Hemet police initiated a traffic stop as Gaddison, the fiance, was pulling into his driveway on the night of March 31st of last year. Quote, with no reasonable suspicion or probable cause, the Hemet officers asked plaintiff for permission to search his vehicle. When plaintiff Gaddison refused, officers forcibly removed him from his vehicle and began to aggressively handcuff and detain him. That was around the time that Monet started recording what was going on. An officer apparently saw that she was doing so, smacked the phone out of her hand, which not only is violent, of course they're not allowed to do that. You are allowed to record these things. They're supposed to be in most areas recording these as well. The officer slammed Mariah's head into the ground. She was taken to the hospital that night and treated for a quote, closed head injury, left shoulder pain, low back pain, neck pain, and whiplash. And you can in fact see a little bit of the bruising in these photos here. Brett, what do you think?
I mean, it's horrifying. If you watch the entire video, it is a combination of that. The dogs, according to the reports that I read, the dog was not killed, but
we're gonna get to a little bit of the footage about the dogs, but yes.
Gotcha. So, but as you watch it play out, it is absolutely horrifying to see the failure of the police to de-escalate a situation. And you also see cops once again upset that they're getting filmed, even though they have body cams on and they're filming other people, and they just don't want to be held accountable. These ones in particular, that's a vibe I got from watching, is they just don't want to be held accountable for their actions. They are slightly inconvenienced by people being upset that in their own opinion, injustice is happening at the hands of the police. And so rather than just deal with it, like everybody has to deal with it when the cops show up, the cops are like, no, I got a badge, so I'm gonna tackle you.
Yeah, if you don't respect me in the way that I want, if you don't speak the way that I want, God help you, if you record me, then I'm gonna do whatever. And by the way, it doesn't even stop them that you're recording them. They still frequently engage in absolutely barbaric violence, because while they are annoyed at the prospect of being recorded, it would be their preference that you not do that. They also know that it being recorded on video is no guarantee that anyone's gonna take it seriously or that there are gonna be consequences. Society is changing on that. The media is changing a bit on that, but it's incredibly slow. And at many steps of the process, the benefit goes to the cops. That's the way that it's been and it remains that way. But no, you can do this recording. I don't understand why, like they find it to be inconvenient. Stop attacking people. What are the stakes here that you would destroy a phone? Like just think about financially the effect of for a random person like destroying their phone, having to replace that. The cost of medical care, let alone if you injure their dogs. And we're gonna turn to this right now. So it also did involve the dogs. We'll have updates on what ended up happening, but first here is that footage.
I think they killed the dog. ¿Qué pasó? Yo no sé.
They killed the dog.
Mataron al perro. ¿Por qué? Yo no sé. I don't know what happened.
It is absolutely devastating. What you could see, eventually you can't see it. And like even more so hearing it, hearing the screams of the kids worried about what's happening to their parents, horrified by what they're seeing. I can't even conceive of being 9 and seeing something like that happening. Like what lingering effect that would have on you. And the casual jumping into the situation of the cops, don't care. You saw like she asked a question at some point and he like stopped himself from saying something. like the approach is just so fundamentally uncaring.
That's
Final
the
thoughts,
best.
Brett?
That's the best thing he did. That's the most decent thing he did.
Is not say whatever it was that he was thinking. Yeah.
Was to take a breath and go back to doing his job.
Yeah.
Poorly, I don't know the full facts of the case, and that's exactly the point of this, is that in the meantime, so that's the one thing. He in that moment did not escalate the situation. But as you can tell, the cops are always moving the goalposts. They tell you to move back, and then they realize you're still filming, and then they tell you to move further back, and then they get too close to you, and suddenly they're at a point where they've run out of patience because they haven't managed everything correctly, and now they're arresting folks. And then you're struggling to see what's going on in the video until the camera goes on the ground. And then you're free to listen to the chaos that's ensued.
It's even more horrifying at that point.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, very briefly, hours running by. We're gonna jump into a crazy update to a story that at every step of the way has been insane. Let's jump into this. A committee in the South Dakota House is looking into whether the Attorney General, Jason Ravensburg, should be impeached for yet more horrible details that are coming out from the situation back in 2020 when he killed a pedestrian with his car. So the Secretary for the Department of Public Safety is Craig Price. He's looking at this. He has sent a letter to the committee revealing new details about this. Let's take a look at one of these details. So Price says that Ravensburg received a text message from an unnamed political consultant within 48 hours of the crash actually happening, commenting on the political party of the victim, Joe Bover. Says text messages that the investigation uncovered between the Attorney General and what appears to be a political consultant include this. Well, at least the guy was a Democrat. I mean, look, there's a lot more bad details about this. Ravensburg was a habitual speeder, had multiple tickets. He'd been stopped 8 times without receiving a ticket. On 5 occasions, he identified himself as the Attorney General, either verbally or by displaying his badge, clearly trying to get out of consequences by using the power of his office there. Before he took office, he had 8 traffic tickets, 6 of them for speeding. All of this before he ends up killing Jim Bover. And he tried to get out of it in the same way, lied about the situation. You might be familiar with this case, said that he didn't initially think that what he had hit was a human. He went back the next day and only then found out. They discovered that Bover's glasses were inside of Ravensburger's car. The idea that he had no idea is impossible to imagine at this point. But who knows? The guy so habitually speeds around, doesn't feel like there's gonna be any consequences. Maybe he didn't even stop to look. Maybe he didn't look around his car. They say that the victim's face was in his windshield. But this guy doesn't care. He thinks that he is above the law in every sense of the word. It's absolutely devastating, Brett. What do you think?
I mean, what do you do with stories like this? There's only so many times that you can say people, I don't know, power goes to people's head, it corrupts them and they think they can get out of it. It's just, usually you're just kind of saying that maybe they want to get out of a ticket. All right, I'm the Attorney General, my friend's a firefighter, maybe because I ran the stop sign, let me go. Mm-hmm. It doesn't stop. It didn't stop there with this guy. This guy ran over a pedestrian.
Yeah, and doesn't seem to care. There are some Republicans who care. Even Kristi Noem, who we're no fan of, is apparently trying to get this guy out of office, whether because she's actually horrified or for political reasons. I have no idea. She's doing the right thing. We'll see what ends up happening. I don't know what more can come out in this case to make clear how little this person seemed to care about what they were doing in the lead up to this, the communications after it. It's just absolutely disgusting. They're supposed to be our servants. They're literally acting like feudal lords, running people over with their carriage and then maybe flipping a coin at the grieving family. That's what this feels like.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.